Okay, welcome back. I've been spending most of my time refactoring, which is always the most fun thing. I mean, it's definitely good. It's definitely satisfactory to finish your, clean up your code and have it all feeling much nicer about it. This was mostly spurred on by A, it needs to be done, and B, kind of took a little break trying to figure out where I want to go with the game next, because I feel a little bit lost still, and I'm like, if I don't have a goal, what am I working towards? I think I have an idea now, but I'm going to prototype it before I really talk about it much. So the refactoring has mostly been around the fact that I have had everything quite decoupled. I do have a base class called a space object, which pretty much just has a transform and an ID. That's the base class. And then after that, there's characters, there's ships, there's space portals, placed items is a space object, planets, yes, that was the other one. So then how do they actually get onto the screen? Well, there's star systems and planet surfaces and within ships themselves. However, the way that all of these handle it wasn't quite the same. Star systems had their own separate, just a straight up list of space objects. So in theory, you could chuck anything into a star system and it would render. Pretty straightforward. But there was no extra... It was a bit too simple, and I wanted to have it there with a walkable area. There was also physics. So star systems had no physics. But walkable planets, I needed physics for characters to walk into the side of ship walls, to run into trees, run into other characters. So walkable areas is what I came up with for characters and trees and colliders for the insides of ships and all that sort of thing. So already I had two separate things. And walkable areas didn't actually, you could not put any space object in there. You could only put characters and placed items and grass down. I'll go into that in a bit more detail. But ultimately, I've realized that I could actually couple a lot of these things together. So a lot of this comes down to, I'd kept them separate because the fallacy of dry, being in all caps, basically usually you want to decouple things. Usually you want to have things decoupled, but at the same time you also don't want to have code duplication. So it's a matter of finding that balance between the fact that you've got a similar thing, like star systems have a list of objects and you can just render them and update them, and planet surfaces, which contain a walkable area, again I'll go into, which you can render them and update them. But are they the same? Again, if one is a physics area and the other one is not a physics area, if I try to couple them together, that could actually cause more problems, because as you couple things together, now logically these two areas behave the same, but they might not maybe they shouldn't behave the same. So I put it off for now whilst I was trying to figure out if these should actually be the same. And based on where I think the game will go and where the game's ended up thus far, I think I can couple these together fairly safely. But it's always one of those things. Yes, I had code duplication, but I was always aware that maybe this is okay, because especially if I need to be hey, ships need to behave differently or characters need to behave differently, that they can and they will, and I'm suddenly not having to worry about the fact that I've now got it where the code paths for these two unrelated things would be interacting with each other. So yeah. So the way I organized the areas which allowed for characters and items to be placed was I made a class called a Walkable Area. I wanted this to be a separate thing that allowed for ships and planet surfaces to both support being able to place objects and have characters move around. So the way I organized it was that there was a list of characters, which were dogs, a list of any placed items, chairs, teleporters, and for the grass effects I had a separate list again. Now, all of these under the hood were actually all of a class I had already called Space Object. So all of these were kind of already subclassed of all the same class, but because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't overfitting some of these things first, I made it that okay, characters are probably treated differently from placed objects, which are treated differently from decorative things like grass. So I kept them separate for now. Now, how did a walkable area know where it was? Well, I had another two separate thing. I had another two separate pointers that linked back to either a ship or a planet surface. Now again, these were two separate classes. Anyway, at the moment, they're two separate classes. So, one of the pointers will always be null. You just have to check both and be like, okay, is it part of a ship or is it part of a planet surface? So the new system I've got is just called an area. Inside that area has a list of space objects. Doesn't matter what kind of space object it is. And the object, any kind of space object, has a link back to the area that it's in. Makes sense. Internally, however, not all objects can contain another area with inside of them. So all space objects can be inside an area and they know what area they're inside of, but not all space objects contain an area in themselves. Unlike a planet surface, ships, and star systems, they can all contain areas now. Notice how I now have an additional area supporting star systems. Star systems were handled completely differently. They just had a list of space objects with the guise that pretty much everything was either going to be a planet or a ship. I kind of treated it as if they were. So now star systems, ships, and planet surfaces are actually all space objects, and those three specifically contain an area, which at the moment an area then has a link back. It uses a union to point to know whether or not it links back to a star system, ship, or planet surface. I have been wondering if I should change this further and make it that all space objects can contain an area within them, and then that would make this even more generalized, but that starts to reach the point where a space object becomes maybe a bit too heavy. Like, I want to have it that I can spawn a lot of things as a space object, because you just don't need, great, you've got this one generic class, but having it that like this one generic class could be literally anything, too generically, I feel like it's too heavy. Anyway, so now that's how it's been reorganized. It's definitely more straightforward and simplified a bunch of code anyway, and I'm happy to leave it at this point because at the moment there isn't any real conceivable, there's nothing planned where this would change, except for maybe inventories. I've been wondering if I should make it that an inventory is a list of space objects. But anyway, that's a totally different thing. So previously, how was I rendering all of this? So I had a pointer to either the current star system or current planet surface. So this is what we were looking at. Or let me go back for Let me go back for a second. So for rendering, I either had a pointer to a star system or a planet surface, and then I would go whichever one wasn't null. I would then go ahead and go, okay, star system, go render yourself. Planet surface, go render yourself. It didn't have to be where the character necessarily was. Player. So there was either these two things, or if there was a transition, which is that effect that goes when you use the teleporter, then I had a from state, which could be either a star system or planet surface, to a to state, which could be to a star system or planet surface. And you could go from a planet surface to a star system, to another planet surface, from a star system to a star system, or from a star system to a planet surface. I kind of wrapped up all of this logic behind some, abstractions, but ultimately under the hood I had a lot of these sorts of things going on, and it was starting to get a bit complicated, which I knew was happening, but I wanted to, at the moment I didn't want to merge these things just in case there were any issues merging it. Also, at this point, these things weren't space objects. That's not even before we get into space portals, where if we were rendering a transition, this didn't happen, which means space portals didn't work during a transition anyway. But if you were in a star system, it would then check for all the space portals in there and then handle the space portal rendering logic at that one layer, which meant you couldn't render a portal within a portal at all, because, I guess you could, but the system wasn't built for that. It was very much here is one extra check if you're in a star system, check if there are space portals, do that extra step. That was it. And then inside of that, it would internally call the same draw logic that was already being used by star system or planet surface. So, for rendering now, I start off with, you have a target object. So in this case, it would be the player. So that's a character that's inside something. I wish it wasn't in the squeaky chair. So the first thing it would do is go ahead and try to find the parent. What am I ultimately inside of? Because we now have that hierarchy of, okay, I'm inside this area, which is part of something. We aren't expecting that this is going to have too many layers, but I guess I'm kind of starting to edge on a little bit, like maybe an area could be inside of area, but it's kind of built as if, well, I'm not really. I don't think the scope will include that. So right now the parent could be a star system or a planet surface. Obviously the parent object could be a ship, in which case then it does keep going up. So that's where kind of like it's a little bit of a loop, but obviously the depth of this is pretty low, so it's never going to have to loop for long. So the first thing it does is it finds where the parent is for the object that you're currently focusing on, and then calls the render logic for that star system or planet surface. That's relatively unchanged, but it's centered on the object that's the target. Ultimately, the parent in each case though is just a space object. So because it's all wrapped up neatly, I'm basically like, yo, I'm in this space object, go find the root object, render that. So I don't have to actually go ahead and care like, okay, did I find a star system or a planet surface? I can actually just keep going up the inside area parent and keep doing that until I hit the top. So that's one step. Now if there's transition going on, I have a from a single space object to a single space object. And I just go between them. And then I can just use the same logic. Internally, I'm just calling that same space object render logic now for each transition from and to, and I get the same result, but now it's much easier of like, I'm going from here to here. Now, with space portals, I just go, hey, I'm actually now wanting to render this space portal, but I want to render it from the perspective of the player, and I can just reuse this whole logic again. That box is maybe not quite right, because maybe it should actually extend out to include that space portal, because all of that is encapsulated in that same render pass, which means if there is a portal found inside an area, I just render that portal, and if inside the portal's new area, if there's a portal, I can render it again. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work. I think that's because my whole draw this thing from this perspective isn't quite working. I've ended up with a few bugs trying to render portals within portals. But most of it is like graphical. It's like clearly some of my maths or some of my logic is slightly off, but the ultimate effect is there, and I can see another portal, and I can see that I actually am rendering that other star system because I can see that other star, but like some of the layering and some of the cutting off isn't quite working. So I think it means that this system is sound. It's just my implementation needs to be tidied up rather than the system being not at all sound. The real things that I've changed is I've added in some UI stuff. So I can come over here and go to objects, and I actually get a list of all the objects in the game at the moment. So I can go ahead and see player character, slightly off screen. You can see player character, type character, inside area, ship. Yeah, I think I then... Yeah, I named the ships... I named the player's ship player, which makes this very confusing. I'm like, okay, inside area, it's an inside a ship, and it's called player, which got very confusing. Yeah, I need to change some of these. But yeah, then I can select that, and I can see, now I'm looking at player, and I can see it's inside area, star system. It's of type star system, and the star system is called star system 1. You can see its position is this is the moment, but as you can see, all of that updates as I move around. So areas themselves have layers, so there is a background layer, there is a main layer, and a foreground layer. A little bit hard to see, but the background layer contains item 1, which is a placed item. That will be the teleporter. That's the thing that's always behind the player, which ultimately is unfortunately underneath the chair as well at the moment. But, here the main, you can see the list of items sort of moves around See, right now the player is behind the chair, so it's the first item. And if it goes down, now it's in front of the chair and the list changes. This is the only layer that's actually sorted to make sure this happens, because otherwise I just draw it in the order they're positioned. But yeah, I can go in and check. You can see it's at -10. Anyway, so I've got this whole system in here. Ultimately, a lot of this was because I also wanted to add in, let's move this out of the way, yeah, some proper ways to be able to actually like click on things. Let's use the chair again. See, now I can be all like, that's Star System Planet 2. That's Star System Star 1. Yeah, I don't have the best names for some of these. This ship was just called Other, because this was the other ship. There's Space Portal. Woo. I feel like I should be better at controlling this. But the cool thing is, I'm looking through here, so Other should be there, right? Should be directly to the left of the portal. If I go over here and then try to click, now I can't click on it. When I click on that star, it says SS2, Star System 2, Star 1. So I've got it where you can actually click through portals to actually see what's on the other side. Just maybe get that? Yeah, Star System 2, Planet 1. So I've been adding in some of these relatively minor things, but a lot of it has come about from big refactors that have, you know, taken a while. But I mean, this is all using the new system and everything still works basically the same, except for some of the positioning. So I haven't gone back and updated things. But you know, like, should still be able to teleport to the space station. See, Tumbo is now all the way down here instead of up there, but you know, I can still talk to Tumbo and be all like, yo, Tumbo. Some of these UI elements don't disappear during dialogue. A lot of polish obviously isn't there at the moment. But yeah, so that's where we're at. Big refactor. I have an idea of where I want to go with the game next. It involves sniffing and an encyclopedia or a compendium. Compendium is a better word. Anyway, that's a thing that I actually want to prototype. I hope to be done with this refactor so I can kind of actually show something new other than like basic interactivity, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching.